Logistical side of things, because I can't see everybody on the screen, if you have something that you would like to share, please use the raise hand button, and you can access that by clicking the participants button at the bottom of your screen, and that will open up a window on the right side, and then you can see the raise hand button there. And if you do happen to not be able to figure it out, just write a comment in the chat. Someone will probably help you be able to do that. And if you really still can't figure it out and you wave, someone will probably eventually let me know or let us know that you want to share. So it'll all be good. So I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Rohini Ross, and live in Topanga, California. And we started these community nights last year in the spring, I believe it was, just as a intention to just stay in the conversation and get to know people in the community. And tonight, I'm really grateful to have Adey-Jones as the speaker. And Del is, you may know Del already because of her wonderful radio show and podcast, Insightful Conversations, which is a wonderful show. And if you haven't checked it out, you might want to. Del's also a coach. She works with a wide range of clients, but she does have a specific niche working with people that have had challenges in narcissistic relationships. So she can share more about that herself. And I'm also really grateful to be working with Del this year. She's one of my practitioner mentees, and so I'm very grateful to have this time with her. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Del, and thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you for that lovely introduction. It's lovely to see everybody. And yeah, so the title of the talk tonight is Letting Go of Our Self-Limiting Stories. I'm going to read it because it's got a tagline here that I'm going to forget. So that we are free to embrace the life we're truly destined to live. And before I came across the principles, I had spent close to 30 years in traditional therapy, trying to fix myself. I felt very, oh, sorry, I was just looking at the chat. I was basically diagnosed as codependent and suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from growing up in a narcissistic environment with physical and emotional abuse. So that's why I love to specialize in that area right now with my clients. So my self-limiting, I had a few self-limiting stories, as I'm sure many of you do, but mine were basically that I should never have been born, that I was worth less than other people, that I wasn't good enough, that I was broken and damaged, and pretty much that was it. But I'll give you a little background of why I had those stories and why they felt so real to me and persisted in my life till I came across the principles. So I grew up in North Wales. I was born in 1959, and it was very sort of rural, very Methodist, chapel-going religious people. And for some reason, my mother, she was born a decade too early. She was not the typical 50s housewife, let's put it that way. She had an affair with my father for about 8 years. He was married. He lived in the village close by. It was about 3 to 5 miles away. And their affair spanned 8 years, and they had 3 children together. And so basically, I never met him. He would come, we back up a little bit. My mum at that time needed to make money to raise her children. She had 6 children at the time. There was a later one, a 7th one that came later, but with no father. So she turned our little Welsh cottage into a home for mentally handicapped people. The local big sort of mental institution closed down, and they were looking for people to take these mentally ill people into the community. So we lived in little caravans in our backyard, and my mum filled a little cottage full of mentally ill and mentally handicapped people. So my father would come and visit at night, but it was when we were asleep and we had our separate caravans, so we never met him. And when I was about 4 years old, my mum was pregnant with my younger brother. My father's wife paid us a visit, and she was very upset, as I'm sure you could understand. But in that moment, I remember seeing her distress and how upset she was, and gathering that my mother and I was the only one at home at the time, had something to do with why she was so upset. And when I went to the village school when I was about 5, it was very clear to me then that the whole community sort of looked down on us and thought that we were, you know, well, they called us names. Illegitimate was one of them, but there was a B word in there too. And I just remember feeling very, very ashamed that I shouldn't have been born. That word illegitimate, I think if you look it up in the dictionary, it's something about not being legal. And I just felt that everybody else was here legally or you know, was supposed to be here, and somehow I had sort of snuck in and I wasn't legitimate. So between, you know, the label of being illegitimate and my father never acknowledging us, when I would pass him and go to school, he didn't even look our direction. And it was just very, very painful. And I think naturally as young children, you'd like to, well, I certainly felt this way, that I thought, well, if I make it about me, that there's something wrong with me, then there's at least a chance that the situation might change. So I told myself that I wasn't pretty enough or clever enough or special enough or whatever it was, and not enough of, that if I could just improve myself, then I would get his attention and I would get his love. So that was pretty much, you know, pretty much my story growing up. I was terrified. The mentally ill people were quite scary to grow up with, especially when, you know, you're a very young child. And when I was about 9, my mother moved us into a big old rambly mansion so she could get a few more mentally ill people in there. And we had about 50 at that time, and no locks on our doors and no family unit. She had us sort of spread out all over the place. And you know, just in her eccentric way, she just said, oh, they're all our, you know, extended family, no locks on the door. And they were, you know, not very safe. There was one incident when I came home and my sister was being strangled, and there was some other really scary incidents, abuse and things like that. So basically, I told myself, as I said, that I was, you know, not good enough, shouldn't be here. And I carried that story throughout my life until I was probably in my mid-50s. And how that impacted me was I was painfully shy, didn't want to be seen, or I felt that to be seen, it was dangerous, which was the leftover from my childhood. And I also felt responsible because of the situation, well, not just the situation with my father's wife, but with other people. I just felt that it was typical codependent behavior, that I was responsible for other people's feelings, and I had to be hyper vigilant to make sure that, you know, danger wasn't around the corner. And again, when you grow up with one parent, you really, really want to keep on the good side of them, because otherwise you're on your own and there's no surviving at, you know, 5 years old on your own. So I just had these beliefs that I carried with me. I would find myself in abusive relationships, didn't think that I deserved any better. I was a people pleaser. Everybody else's needs came before mine. Trying to think what else. Becoming needless and wantless, not to cause problems. My mother was overwhelmed with having to take care of all these mentally ill people. So, you know, at the time I resented them, and I felt very hurt. I felt my mother cared about them more than she cared about us, because they, you know, they were the source of our well-being in a way. I mean, it was the only way she could make money, and she had to take care of them, and their needs were much greater than the children, she felt, because she felt that, you know, we could cope and they couldn't. So I literally had all these unbelievable limiting stories about myself. And I felt that my past was proof that these stories were true. I mean, I never ever doubted that. I just thought this is true because this happened and this happened, and it proves that I am this way. And when I came across the principles, I'd heard about people saying, oh, we're all born equal, we're all, equal, but I couldn't conceive of that because it was so clear to me that I was not equal to anybody else. And so coming across this understanding just gave me I got what I'd heard about intellectually. I got it at such a deep level that we are all born equal. We all come from the same energy. We all come from that formless energy. And so it just was so liberating, just that part alone. And then also to know that it didn't matter what had happened to me in my life. Events happened, clearly they did. But it was what I made, the meaning I made of those events and what I made it mean about me and my self-worth that was the damaging part, the part that caused my suffering, not necessarily the events themselves. I mean, of course, they were painful at the time when they happened, but to carry them around with me for 50 plus years and use it as proof that I wasn't worthy or that I was damaged or broken, to come across this understanding and realize that we're never damaged or broken. We can never be. I mean, who we are at our essence remains untouched, unscathed, unbroken. And that, again, was another freedom that I found through the principles. What else? I'm just thinking here. Yeah, I still get a lot of thinking. I still have a busy mind. I have a habitual pattern of getting nervous and feeling that, I'm not good enough or ready or whatever. But before, just because I had those thoughts, I used to think that they meant something about me. Well, clearly, if I'm thinking it, then it's me, and that it's telling me information about who I am. And now through this understanding that thoughts just come through us, they're just this energy that's constantly coming through us, and those thoughts are neutral and they're up for grabs by anybody. But for some reason, I just thought, that one's mine, that one's mine, and I just hung on to them. And now when I get nervous or I get insecure or something like that, I just, I'm not terribly happy that it showed up, but I know not to take it so seriously. And I certainly don't let it define how I show up in life. Like I show up doing something like this. In the past, before the principles, you wouldn't have ever seen me, talking or being, vulnerable or open or sharing. I would never have done, the podcast radio show that I do. It's, that totally came out of the principles. It was something that I would never have considered. And it was just something deep inside me was just like, you have to share this. And these, insecure, limiting thoughts that I had or stories about myself, it's just what needs to come through and be shared is so much more important than me, listening to those stories and staying small and staying shut down and protecting that ego. So yeah, it's just like, I'm just so much more available and so much more present in life. And my relationships too, now that I realize that, I don't need to be fixed. I have, innate well-being inside me. I don't need to sort of, fix myself. I certainly don't need to fix other people either. So that codependent habit of being attracted to what I thought were wounded, broken people, because that way at least we were equally broken and, whatever. Now I don't, that doesn't have a pull for me anymore. I just completely see that everybody has their own innate wisdom inside them, their well-being. I don't have to interfere. I don't have to fix. I don't have to put their needs ahead of mine. So really it's just impacted me in so many ways. So it's really what I wanted to share is the freedom that you can get with this understanding. And yeah, I just would like to Rohini. That's your cue.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm wondering, before I say anything, from my perspective, I'd love to hear you share more about what you see as how you stopped identifying with those conclusions that you came up with. What was it that allowed that before and after to take place? Like, how do you see that?
Well, it's really, I mean, it was just as I really sort of said already, just coming across this understanding, just seeing something at such a deeper level. Both of us had gone to USM. We both did, the Masters in Spiritual Psychology. And, we talked about sort of we're all equal, we're all the same, we're all connected. But I got it here.
Mm-hmm.
Something just didn't land. It never sort of quite dropped down. And I think what I love about the principles too is that it's not just that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. It's just we are all one. That human part of ourselves and the spiritual part of ourselves is one. And what this community brings to me is that we can just embrace that sort of fabulous human part of ourselves. We don't need to change it or fix it or do a spiritual bypass. It's just like, no, we naturally, we wake up and then we fall asleep again, and then we wake up and go to sleep again. And we're going to go through those cycles of, low mood and high mood, and that's just natural. So if I do get insecure or I do find myself in a low mood, there's a knowing deep inside me that it will pass. It's not going to stay around. I don't have to do anything about it. I don't have to fix it. So really it was just like I said, just really understanding that it's okay to be human. We all have it. We all have our insecurities, and that I don't have to force them. I think I shared with you the other day that I did the 3PGC talk, and I got very nervous. It was one of the first times I'd done one of these talks. And the reason I got so nervous was because I was fighting being nervous. I was like, I shouldn't be nervous. When I came into this one, I was like, well, I know I'm going to be nervous, so that's fine. And it's so far less nerve-wracking because I was just okay with being nervous.
Yeah, takes the pressure off, doesn't it?
It's amazing. It's amazing. So yeah, I want to hear about some of your self-limiting stories, Rohini.
Well, I want to just kind of speak to, there's a lot of similarities in terms of your historical background, my historical background. I was also an illegitimate child. I didn't grow up with my father. I ended up getting in contact with him when I was in my 20s, though, so that was really lovely that we have a relationship now. And I don't know sort of where all of my sort of crazy conclusions came from. I'm sure some of it came from that. I'm sure came from other events in my life. But I can absolutely relate to the feeling of not being good enough, to the feeling of being very self-conscious and shy growing up, and as a result bullied quite a bit, and often growing up in fairly white areas, and so being singled out as the packy or whatever other names were called to me. So I came to conclusions about myself as sort of not measuring up. But what I had the coping mechanism that I came up with was one of doing well. So it served me to a point in the sense that I was good at school, so I just worked really hard at school and did that. I was fortunate that I was able to make good friendships. So in my teenage years and 20s, I partied a lot and had a lot of fun. But it wasn't coming from all of it wasn't coming from the natural expression of just wanting to be myself in the world. There was this other motivation at play that was about trying to earn my worth. Mm-hmm. So feeling unworthy and trying to find ways to earn my worth and to prove my worthiness to myself. And where I sort of went got more entrenched in all of that was, even though I was in my 20s, I started meditation and doing yoga. Then later on, I started doing therapy, and as you said, a master's in spiritual psychology, and really went down that psychological and spiritual path. But what I did was I used it against myself. I fit it in to the pattern that I already had in place of, if I can do this well, then I'll be good enough. So if I can meditate enough, then I'll be good enough. If I can, heal all my issues, then I'll be good enough. And so it wasn't really escaping from the misunderstanding. I was using these other seemingly useful techniques that should be about liberation and freedom, but I was actually using them against myself. And so for me, that was what really shook my world when I came across this understanding, because it was so clear as, as I got more clarity about what this understanding is about, because it definitely took me a little while to figure that out. It was so clear that it was so simple, and it was pointing to exactly what you've been talking about, is the wholeness that's inside of each one of us. But I didn't need to earn that. I didn't need to work for that. It wasn't something that if I got better meditation, then I would get that. And so that rocked my world, that there was nothing that I had to do, that it existed in the here and now. And one of the big misunderstandings that I had was also very similar to yours, that I felt that my feelings of unworthiness were proof of my unworthiness. And that's like a vicious circle when you get into that. So I really felt like, because I was insecure, had feelings of insecurity, because I had feelings of anxiety, because I had feelings of unworthiness, well, that was proof of my unworthiness, and therefore I needed to get rid of those feelings. And again, the shift with this understanding is exactly what you talked about, in terms of really seeing that feelings are just a normal part of the human experience. We all have the full range of emotions. There's no feeling that means anything about us. And feelings are simply a reflection of the thoughts that we're having in the moment, that we're identifying with. And they're always going to pass. There's no way that we can control our thinking. There's no way that we need to, because it's way too much work. But what I had been doing instead was, I had been thinking, well, and this even happened when I first came across this understanding, because I really saw clearly that my feelings were a reflection of those thoughts. And so then it just made sense to me, well, then what I've got to do is straighten out my thinking, because if it's my thinking that's causing me to feel bad, then I just need to have better thinking, and then I'll feel better. So that, again, like I said, was exhausting, and it didn't work. There was no way to control thoughts. And all it did was create more of a resistance to my experience, which created more work for myself in the long run. So at a deeper level, what I saw was that not only was I okay, genuinely okay, but there was no thought or feeling that could negate that. There was no thought or feeling that I could have that could mean that that wasn't true. And that didn't mean that I had to stop identifying with these thoughts. Like, that was my perfectionism would have said, well, I have to stop buying into them then. But it's like, no, I can buy into them. I can get caught up. I can believe that I'm unworthy. It means nothing. It doesn't mean I'm unworthy just because I think I'm unworthy. Now, that might sound really simple to a lot of people, but it was really revolutionary for me. It was the interrupt that I needed to see that who I am is innately worthy, and who we all are is innately worthy, and that worth isn't ever an issue that's on the table. Now, what helped that to sort of clarify in my mind was the understanding of the natural role that thoughts and feelings play in our life, the understanding of the human psychology being this normal, healthy experience that doesn't need to be fixed, that is self-stabilizing. So, you know, on the physical level, I got the idea that my body has an intelligence within it that knows how to heal, and that, you know, if my body is getting a fever, that's part of the healing process, or if I throw up, then that's part of the body getting rid of a virus. And so I trusted that on the physical level. But on the emotional level, I didn't trust that. I didn't realize that there's this innate intelligence that is for physical, mental, and emotional that is unfolding, and that I didn't need to try and control my experience, because I was afraid of my experience. But I was only afraid of it because I didn't think that it would self-regulate. I thought that I needed to regulate it for me to be okay. And so when I saw that no matter how stirred up I got, I will self-regulate. And the quicker I'll regulate more quickly, the less I do about it. And the metaphor that I love to use with myself and with clients is the metaphor of water. And it's like if you drop a pebble into still water, then there's the ripples. And if you drop a bunch of pebbles in, there's going to be a lot more ripples. Well, if I want to have calm water, I just want to leave that water alone, and it will naturally stabilize. And I didn't realize that the same principle happens with thought, that if thinking is left alone, it naturally stabilizes. And so because I didn't realize that, I was going into my thinking trying to smooth it out. And of course, the more energy I put into the thinking, whether I was resisting it, whether I was, judging it, whether I just didn't like it, the more stirred up I would get. So I just got more comfortable being in whatever emotional experience I'm in. And again, this is a learning curve. I'm continuing to learn this and see more about this, but I certainly made like a big shift in terms of my level of comfort, and saw that I was okay no matter what my emotional experience is. And that was really liberating, because I had very much been on a self-help journey. And so it was very much about fixing the experience that I was having in order to be worthy. But then with this understanding, which is telling all of us that we are innately worthy, we are innately whole, the only thing that gets in the way of us experiencing that is when we identify with our thinking. And we don't even need to fix that, because even if we identify with thinking that's untrue, that's a misunderstanding, at some point, we're not going to identify with it anymore, and we're going to come back home inside of ourselves. And it will happen more quickly when I don't worry about it, and it will happen more slowly when I get all involved with it. But it doesn't matter either way. I'm still fine. It doesn't matter. And eventually I'm going to come back home. So this was like, I don't know how much energy I had been putting into this whole self-improvement thing, but it felt like a lot, and it felt like I got a whole bunch of energy back. And I know one of the other things that I noted as a sort of before and after this understanding is, before the understanding, I was definitely feeling burnt out, but I was also getting sick regularly. Like probably every month I would have a couple of days, if not more, where I had to just rest and be in bed and kind of regroup and get ready, for the next week ahead of me. After this, that completely went away. And whereas before, when I was really burnt out and feeling like, maybe I can't be a therapist, maybe I can't do certain things, what am I going to do? What happened was, because I wasn't spending all that energy trying to fix myself, trying to manage my experience, and I was just allowing myself to just be where I was at, I got so much more energy back. And I was able to do more than I was even doing before and not feel burnt out, which was like mind blowing to me. And not only was I not burnt out, I was feeling even more inspired and more energized from what I was engaging with. And that hadn't happened before. And I realized why it hadn't happened before is because there was so much energy being put into trying to protect myself, trying to not make a false step, trying to get it right, trying to improve myself, like all of those misunderstandings that somehow I wasn't okay and that I could get it wrong, they just kind of fell away. I didn't make them fall away, they just fell away. And from that, there's just this freedom to kind of experiment, play. If I get it wrong, oh well, so what? Pick myself up again, dust myself off, and keep going. And so that was just something that I wasn't expecting, but something that just really woke me up to the truth of the potential that we have inside of us, every single one of us. So everything that I'm saying, everything that Della's saying is not just true for us, because we're not special in this way, even though we may have similar historical experiences that aren't the same as someone else's. But what we're pointing to in terms of potential, in terms of innate well-being, in terms of how human psychology is self-regulating, that is true for every single one of us. And the only way we can experience that, though, is checking it out for ourselves. It's very much something that we road test in our own lives and see what we recognize that's new and different for ourselves. And so all of us, even to this day, myself included, get into habitual thought patterns, get into habitual ways of navigating life. And when I do that, I'm not really in the present moment. I'm not really connected with that deeper sense of self, of who I am. I'm in my mind. And it's much harder to navigate life that way. But as soon as I'm willing to drop down and to get out of my head and just be in the present moment, then life just sort of starts unfolding in ways that I might not even have expected. And there's such a lightness in that, and a fun in that, and a freedom in that. And so to me, that's the huge upside of letting go of these self-limiting beliefs. And I know the question is, how do you let them go? Like, what did Belle say about how she let them go? What did you say about how you, like, how did you let them go? And all I can say is that they were released. I didn't let them go, but they were released through my understanding more about what's true and what's not true. And the more that I could see that my thinking about myself was not true, the easier it was for it to just dissipate. And the way that I saw more and more, and continue to see more and more, that thinking isn't truth, it's just thinking, is by connecting more deeply with that innate wellness inside, by looking in that direction rather than looking in the direction of everything I think that needs to be fixed and changed in my life. Because I was obsessed with looking at what was wrong and how to fix it, and coming up with all kinds of strategies to do that. And it didn't get me very far. But looking in the complete opposite direction, not to what's wrong, but to what is innately whole inside of myself, the peace that is inside of myself, even with all of these things that I might think are wrong or that I don't like, the willingness to look in that direction was what freed me up from identifying with a lot of those thoughts. And that's the continued journey that I see myself on, that it's a continuing journey of waking up to thought and seeing it as thought. And as soon as I see it as thought, it loses its grip over me. And that's, to me, that's an infinite journey that I'm excited to be on. And I'm grateful that I've seen enough at this point that I can have the level of enjoyment of life that I had, because I really wanted to enjoy life, but I just didn't know how to. And so for me, that's, you know, kind of my story on that, Belle.
I love that, and it is so true. There's no effort. There's no effort in not taking it so seriously anymore. It's just, once you know that, it's one of those, whoops, I got caught up, and then you just sort of laugh, because it's just human. It's just what we do. It's not serious. Yeah. It's not one of those sort of, I used to think when we were at USM that, you know, I needed to become more spiritual so that I could sort of, again, years and years and years of workshops and certifications and everything to improve myself and try and fix myself. But just as you say, there's nothing to fix. And when
Yeah.
you know that deep, deep inside you, it feels so wonderful.
And when we see that for ourselves, you mentioned this earlier, it's so much easier to see how that's true for other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the biggest, certainly one of the most important areas of my life where I've seen significant changes in my relationship with Angus and my relationship with my kids, where my ability to recognize the innate resilience, the innate wisdom within myself has allowed me to also to see that in others more clearly as well. And my ability to be with my own humanness allows me to be with their humanness more easily too. And to really see that behavior is a reflection of our understanding in the moment. And every single one of us is doing the best we can in each moment. And when I really see that, it just makes it so clear how innocent we all are, and how the natural response is compassion if someone's suffering, even if they're behaving badly. And I have to say, it's very humbling that, you know, Angus and I would volunteer in the prison project, and I would be able to see the psychological innocence of an inmate sitting in front of me, but you know, he might forget to buy something that I asked him to get, and I wouldn't be able to see his psychological innocence. And it's like, really? Really? So again, but then to see my own psychological innocence and how stirred up I am about things needing to be a certain way, or, you know, I don't know, it's craziness in my mind. But I just see more and more how there's room for the ups and downs of mood and the behavior that goes along with that, and that it's in the spaciousness for that and the acceptance of that, rather than it getting worse and being something that I'm condoning, because I'm not condoning bad behavior. It actually regulates so much faster. The bounce back time is so much quicker. My upset, yeah, I might get upset, but I bounce back so much more quickly. If Angus isn't, you know, in the greatest mood and doesn't behave nicely to me, like, I'm so much less likely to take that personally, because I understand that he's just caught up and that he's suffering in that moment and he's going to get over it. And why do I even need to think about it then? Because that's his issue, it's not mine. And the fuel that used to get added to the fire between us doesn't get added anymore, or it gets added much less. Or if it does get added in a big way, it goes out pretty quickly. So it's like the relationship piece is so profound, and it's why, you know, it's one of the areas that I love working in, and I know you've seen that too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the psychological innocence, because, you know, often people would say to me, well, aren't you angry with your mother or your father or whoever abused you? And it really, I mean, that psychological innocence, understanding separate realities, brought so much peace to my life. I don't have to go back and try and figure out why somebody did something. It's like they were just doing the best they could in the moment with the thinking they had. Even if the behavior was out, you know, looked on the outside like it was outrageous, it really was. They were just basically acting out on the thinking they were having in that moment. And I don't waste my time trying to go back in and figure it out or judge or anything. It's just, you know, we, as you say, the psychological innocence. And I've forgotten, it's gone out of my head, but there was another point that you brought up. But just, yes, the relationships, just my relationship with my children, all my relationships are so healthy now. I mean, incredible. Yeah, I just there's so much that has changed in my life since coming across this understanding. So incredibly grateful for that.
Yeah, it was lovely. How are we doing on time? So why don't we open it up to the group for questions? You okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So as I said before, if you have a question, go to the participants button, then click the raise hand button, and then we'll be able to call on you and unmute you. And it might not be a question. You might just have something that you'd like to share based on your experience, something that you might have seen. It might be a reflection that's just come up for you while you've been listening to tonight, or anything that you'd like to share with the group. And so I see, Jackie, you've got your hand raised. And if you have it, if you want to direct the question to both Del and I, that's fine. If you want to direct it to one of us, that's fine too. So just, whatever works for you. Jackie.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm actually I just turned 69 on the 9th was my birthday.
Happy birthday. Happy belated birthday.
But yeah, I understand how both of you feel like not worthy and stuff. My mom got married when she was 14 and had me and my twin sister when she was 16. And my dad left when we were just a couple weeks old. He wanted my mom to put us in an orphanage or put us up for adoption and whatever, but she refused. And I found he never kept in touch. And with luck, I found him when I was 30. It took me 2 phone calls. I saw him, he came out here a couple times, and I have a half brother, half sister, stepsister. I haven't met my half brother yet. I don't know that I probably ever will, but I've met my half sister and my stepsister. But when my dad died several years ago, even after I found him, and I thought we had good relationships and stuff, me and my twin sister weren't even mentioned in his obituary as being his daughters. Mm-hmm. That really hurt. Mm-hmm. And I always blame my mom for not keeping in touch with him, because all of my cousins grew up with both of their parents. So, you always wonder, why didn't I? And then it was my grandma. We lived with my grandma until we were like 12. And I always grew up. Then when I started dating, I dated the bad boys. Because I didn't think I was
more exciting.
Yeah. And then if I dated the nice guys, I just didn't feel good enough. So, and then when I finally did get married, well, the first time I got married, I was 20, and I wasn't into drugs or anything, but he would shoot anything he could get in a needle, and he physically abused me once and thought he was going to kill me. And then I went and told my grandma, and I had him arrested and put in jail and everything. And then I dated and married my 2 kids' dad, and we was married for 10 years, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't satisfied. He had a good job, took care of us, but I go, I'm not happy. Let's move. So we moved out of state. I'll be happier if we move out of state. No, I wasn't. So we moved back and everything. And then we ended up getting a divorce. And and after going through this with the principles and stuff, for the most part, it's helped, but I'm still not happy. I've got a good husband now. We've been married 33 years, but I think I told you here a while back that a year ago I went through a breast cancer scare, and then 2 years ago I had a heart scare, and I'm still not done with the breast cancer scare. I still have to go back in May for that. So I don't know, I'm just not happy.
And would you say that you're never happy?
Well, I'm happy when I'm seeing my daughter or my son calls me, and we've got a great granddaughter, and I've got 2 wonderful grandsons. So when my grandson comes over with his little girl, she's going to be 3 in June, that makes me happy.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, we'll hear what Del has to say, but to me, that's what's really important to recognize, Jackie, that you have times when you're not happy, and you also have times when you are happy. And what I encourage you to look at is not just the circumstances that are going on when you're feeling happy, like you're having your grandchildren visit or your grandchild visit, but to notice what's going on in terms of your state of mind when you're happy. Because what you'll probably see when you start looking is that you have less on your mind, you're more in the present moment. And when there's less on your mind, it's like there's less on our mind, well-being goes up. More on our mind, well-being goes down. Like it's just like this. That's how it works. And so the more that you see when you're in a low mood, and there's nothing wrong with being in a low mood. I'm not saying you shouldn't be in low moods, that you should always be happy. That's not what I'm saying. But when you are in a low mood, you'll realize that you've got more going on your mind. Now, that's not the natural state for human beings. The natural state for human beings is to be in the present moment, to be settled, to be in equilibrium. And when we're in our natural state, we're feeling peace, we're feeling love, we're feeling joy, we're in the present moment. But we get caught up, we get habitual with our thinking, and we don't even realize we're doing it. And so that's why I want you to notice the difference, not in what's around you, but what your state of mind is between when you're happy and when you're not happy. One, you'll start to notice that you're probably happier more of the time than you realize, because a lot of the times we notice more how much we're unhappy versus when we're happy.
Yeah, we do.
Because that's the problem. This isn't the problem. So just noticing more like, wow, look at the flexibility. My mood goes up and down. Well, what's the variable there? The variable is how much you're identifying with thinking. And thinking is often habitual and invisible to us. We don't even realize we're doing it. Just like somebody could be chewing their nails and not even realizing they're chewing their nails. Like we get into thought patterns and we're not even realizing that we're running them and that we're giving them energy and bringing them to life. Now, the more you see how it works, this is not about doing anything. It's really just about understanding how it works. The more you'll be able to be on that learning curve of fueling this thinking that when you identify with results in a feeling of unhappiness, the more you'll be on that learning curve of not doing that and having less on your mind. Because we're natural learners, and as human beings, we are designed to move away from pain and suffering. Mm-hmm. We are innately designed to move away from pain and suffering. Like if my hand touches something hot, instinctively, I take my hand off. There's no instinct in me that says, yes, go further into that heat. Just automatically, doesn't take any effort. Well, the same is true when we understand when I dig into my thinking and it's a one-to-one relationship and creates suffering, then I instinctively let it go because that's how I'm designed and that's how we're all designed. But when we don't understand where the pain and suffering is coming from, then we look to outside things. Like you said, let's move states. I've done that before. Angus and I moved countries before. But it's like, you know, let's do this, let's do that. It's because we don't understand. We don't understand where the pain and suffering is coming from. So we look out there and think, what can I get right out here? Instead of realizing, oh, it's coming from inside. It's coming from this habitual thinking that's so familiar and invisible that you're not even realizing that you're keeping it alive. But the more you look at what your state of mind is when you're happy, rather than looking at what you're doing when you're not happy, I want you to look at what's going on when you're happy. You'll start to put these dots together inside of yourself, and you'll start to realize, oh, my mind is relaxed. My mind is free. I'm in the present moment. That's where well-being comes from. As soon as you see that more and more for yourself, you're going to be on that learning curve of like, oh, this is how I have less on my mind. Because I don't have an answer for you in terms of what do you do to have less on your mind. Yeah. All I can tell you is see for yourself how it works, and you will naturally figure out what works for you regarding that.
Yeah, because my mother passed away 3 years ago, and before she passed, well, we was cleaning out her house, and my niece ran across the journal or diary. She wrote one to my sister and one to me. And in mine, she told me everything that I did that was a disappointment to her. I just had to shred it.
Yeah. And that's a reflection of her state of mind. You know, like Del was saying, the psychological innocence. But thank you, Jackie. And I really encourage you to just look in the direction of when you're happy, notice how that works. Just notice how it works, and you'll see more around that for yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Del?
I don't think so. That was absolutely beautiful.
Okay. Well, we do have a bit of time until someone else raises their hand.
Yeah, no, that was beautiful, and it's right. It's the less. There's nothing to do. I think that's where we still get in that habitual thinking that there's something to do to make ourselves happier, or something to do, and that just speeds the mind up.
So true. Nancy. Oh, Claudette, sorry. Claudette and then Nancy.
It kind of seems to me that that the kind of default human belief is that, you know, I'm not enough, there's something wrong with me, I'm broken. I don't know that I've ever run across somebody who actually doesn't have that as an underlying belief. And I just wonder if you could kind of speak to that. I mean, is that really kind of universal, or is it really personal, you know?
That's interesting. You know, I can't speak for everybody else, so I can only really speak from my own personal experience. But I think there is, for me, I think that when we're parenting our young children, sometimes we use shame to get certain behavior out of them, or what we consider good behavior. And I think that's very innocent on the part of the parents. But I think there could be a subtle message at a very early age that that there's something wrong with you, you're not doing something right. That's the only thing that I can think. And then I think there are some people, I think there's degrees of not enough you feel. I mean, I think everybody's individual on that, but I agree with you. I think there is something that it is a very common human experience that many people have. And we can look to, you know, different backgrounds and what happened. I mean, I can sort of say, well, I felt this way because of the way I was raised, but I'm one of, as I said, one of 7 children, and we all react differently to the same environment, basically, very differently. So it's what I made of my upbringing, but each of my siblings had a different experience. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think that I would agree in terms of my experience. It seems like that's universal. If you get under it all, there's that feeling of unworthiness. I don't know that everyone has that, but it just seems like that's often the core for people in terms of the misunderstanding. And it makes sense to me that as children, we just think life is about us. So as Adele was saying, we make it about us. So it must be because I'm not right or not good enough. And the good news, I think, about this understanding is that it doesn't really matter which misunderstanding we're looking at. The answer is always going to be the same. So whether we're looking at, you know, I'm buying into feeling unworthy in this moment, or I'm buying into some other thought about myself that's limiting, it's always going to be the same direction that it points us to, which is to not identify with our thinking and to look within to a place of peace within ourselves, and that whatever we need to do that gets us unhooked from our thinking is fair game, as long as we're not hurting ourselves and someone else. And to me, it's universal that we identify with thinking that creates suffering. It's universal, and there's one answer.
That's actually a good way to think of it, because when I think of, like, you know, babies, newborns, I mean, I know they don't come in feeling unworthy.
Right.
you know, or that there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it's you know, develops when we develop an ego. And but I like, you know, I like what you both said, you know, about that. That's helpful.
Thanks, Claudette. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just learned behavior that we all learn as part of
Yeah.
our survival mechanism.
Right, and how we, and the meaning we make of it, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Claudette.
Thank you.
Nancy, sorry, it's your turn now.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
It's been years. Another USM person here.
Oh, welcome.
So I have been taking a lot of notes and listening to what everybody's been saying. And this is really funny. It's like my life just seems to be in this interesting flow. I've never done the three principles. I have no idea what they even are. I was sort of looking them up when you guys were first talking, and I thought, it's like, it seems very similar. It's like, it was really weird when I saw your name with Amy Johnson's, because I'm doing Little School, Big Change.
Oh, fantastic.
And I went, oh my gosh, they know each other. All these people I know each other. It's pretty cool. And when I was thinking about what you guys were saying, I thought the only time in my life it just hit me where I really experienced a shift that I had no idea how it happened was when I found Course in Miracles. And I found Course in Miracles, and at the time I was a Jewish atheist, and I opened up the textbook. I got the books. It was a long story. I'll just tell a little of it. So I opened up the textbook, and I see these words, Jesus, Christ, atonement, salvation, and I was like, no, because I felt so good about it when I found out about it. So I threw all the books under the bed except for the workbook, and then I did those lessons, which are very spiritual in nature and not religious in nature, like nothing I see means anything. I went, okay, I can get behind that. And when the first lesson talked about God, it was like, God did not create a meaningless world. And I went, okay, if there is a God, which I doubt, he didn't create a meaningless world. So that's sort of how I did that. And then like a month or so later, I pulled the books out from under the bed, and those words meant nothing. I had no positive feeling toward them, but I had no negative. It was I went, oh, they're just words. They're just concepts, and they didn't affect me in any way. And what I'm sort of getting is that what you guys are talking about and what Amy talks about is it's something similar, where all of a sudden you wake up one day and go, oh, not a big deal anymore. This pain is it's not pain. It's just an experience, or the thought about my whoever has got my goat at this point. It's like, it's just a thought. And I'm just, I know that I have a very strong tendency to want to be a doer and find a way, it's like, let me write those papers for USM. Let me grade those papers for USM. Let me do something that will move me forward. And I'm just getting, now finally at 67 years old, that it's not about doing it all. And I guess what I'd like you to talk about maybe is the shift from one who needs to do and move to one who just needs to be. Because that's kind of the sense that I'm getting that it is. Is that accurate?
I would say that's accurate. Is there anything more specific in your question, or just to share more about that?
The truth is, I want to know how to do it, but it's like that's the wrong question.
I love that you know that's the wrong question.
The last thing I wrote down was, how can I use my Course in Miracles experience to change other things? How can it's like, what did I do inside of myself? And I know I focused on those other lessons, and I don't know if it's about focusing on the beauty of the universe, focusing on just finding really wonderful things to focus on so often and so consistently that I then stop, that the next time something else kind of comes in, it's like, oh, what was that blip, So I don't know. I guess I'm just in this, what does Mary call it? The place where you're in that confusion place.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
I do know that place, and it's a really good place to be. And I really want to acknowledge that you knew that the how-to question was not the right question.
Oh, completely.
That you knew that that experience that you had with the Course in Miracles was something that you couldn't explain. It wasn't something that you did, but it's one of the most impactful things in your life as you're describing it.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, your recognition that it's not about doing, it's not about the how-to, it's about how do you allow this understanding to simply blossom inside of you the way that it did with the Course in Miracles. That's looking in the direction that you're going to get fresh thinking around. You're going to see things new, because it's not on you. You cannot force a shift in level of consciousness.
Right.
That's not within our personal control. What we can do is enjoy the level of consciousness that we're at, and not try to fix ourselves and change the level of consciousness that we're at. Like, that's what we can do. And when you're talking about the being, like, sometimes we think about being as like, well, I'm just sitting on a meditation mat, just being. It's like, well, no, being is a state of mind that you can be in no matter what you're doing. So that being state of mind is just something that you drop into and you experience. Sometimes you're doing things when you're in that state of mind. Sometimes you're not doing things when you're in that state of mind. Mm-hmm. But respecting it is what's important. And that's what I hear you're respecting and you're recognizing. And that when you get pulled into, well, no, there must be something more I can do, you'll just see, oh, that's my habitual thinking coming in. And that's driven by insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's driven by, there must be more that I need to do, or there must be something better than I've got right now. And ultimately, everything we've got is here and now, and we don't need anything more.
Can you talk more about when you said it was driven by insecurity?
Yeah.
Something went ding, ding, ding inside of me. I'm like, I'm not exactly sure why.
Well, and you can let me know what makes sense to you. But for me, whenever that quality of thinking comes in that says do more, like, the feeling associated with it is not the feeling of peace, well-being, love. It's a feeling of anxiety on some level. It's the feeling of insecurity, and that's what drives that, you know. And that's really, when we talk about the 3 principles, which is the same understanding the paradigm, the new paradigm that Amy teaches about, it's really about understanding, a shift in understanding. So it's not about doing anything. It's really about looking at how we can have deeper and deeper understanding. Now, as soon as we get into I've got to do more, it's like, oh, that's not about understanding. That's about trying to fix something. That's trying to, put that pressure on ourselves in some way. That feeling is the indicator to let you know that you're caught up in insecure thinking. That's okay. All you need to know. You don't need to change it. You don't need to fix it. But if you know that that's insecure thinking and that you don't need to trust it, then it won't drive your behavior. Does that make sense?
The whole, what you just said, the insecure thinking, and you don't have to trust it. I think, I have to write that down. I think that's it, is like that I've grown to trust the insecure thinking and the demand to do more than I've grown to trust the just being and letting it flow and letting it be.
Exactly.
It's almost like this was when I was really little, I got myself into there were undertows that were insane. And there was a guy who came out and went, "Are you okay?" And I went, "Yeah, I wasn't." But I said, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." But I realized that I was fine because I wasn't fighting against the undertow. Mm-hmm. And in some ways that's similar to, it's like, if I were really in trouble, it would be because I wasn't trusting the water, and I was more trusting this guy to come get me and save me, rather than just trusting that if I just somehow let it be, that I would be fine. And I was, obviously, because I'm here.
Yeah.
But, so that's, there's so much in this. It's so cool.
Yeah.
And it's like, and just as a last little thing, you know, it's like I was cleaning out my email and the next email to get to was your guys' email. And I went, oh, that's happening in 10 minutes. Maybe I should do that. I mean, that's how my life has been going. And it's like, what a blessing. And I guess in some ways that is following the flow and not fighting it. And just
exactly.
Like, hey, I love Rohini. Let me see what's going on here, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And Nancy, I didn't recognize who you were. You were on a tiny screen, I put you on the big screen. And so, gosh, I haven't seen you in years. It's so lovely to see you.
It's been a really long time.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, thank you guys for doing this. And Dale, if you have anything to add, that would be awesome, because I'm loving what you're saying as well.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's so, first of all, I think, you know, we often say sort of look for the feeling, not follow the words. And that's really what has helped me so much, because if I'm in my head and I'm trying to figure out and learn strategies or get something or make notes, I know that I'm up here. And I know that if I'm up here, I am not in the present moment. And so what I found was to just, I don't know, I used to call it just hanging out with 3P people and just almost absorbing something, because this up here feels noisy, and sometimes I feel like it's like a rat's cage. It's noisy, messy, and the rat's making noises going on in the wheel as I'm trying to figure things out. And I've experienced, I mean, literally felt that incredible love, peace, whatever you want to call it, that oneness. And I've experienced that a few times now, and it's visceral, and I know it's there. I've had it. I've had that taste of it. And the only thing that can take me away from that, it's not something to get to, it's actually always in me. It's right here. It feels like in my body. The only way that I sometimes forget what is already inside me is if I get lured up into this busy mind.
Yeah.
So I literally, when I find myself there, I'm like, oh, I'm in the wrong place. I literally, like a stone, just sort of drop. And that's the only way I can describe it. But I know that is not the direction that's helpful to me. You know, I sometimes jokingly say, I'm glad I'm a bit thick, because I don't trust my thinking, you know. Sometimes I also had this visual the other day of, like, when I'm up here, it's like driving a rickety old banger, you know, it's like chugging away, and I'm trying to sort of like, it's, you know, making all this noise and everything. And that's me when I'm in my head trying to do something. Mm-hmm. And when I know that I am being guided and that wisdom is constantly providing me with direction, and it's almost like just sitting in the back of a limo, as opposed to driving this little banger on my own trying to get somewhere. It's just, you know, I sit back and I enjoy the ride, and I know that it's just perfect wherever it's going. So
thank you. That's a great visual, the dropping down into the gut from the crazy head.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both. I'm so glad I fell into this place tonight.
That's wonderful.
And you also didn't recognize me, because this used to be Brown when I knew you, you know.
I know. But I recognize you now. Lovely to see you. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
So does anyone else have anything that they would like to share or ask? Anything that you're, oh, here we go, Olga. Do you want me to, I can unmute you. There you go.
Hi, happy to be here too.
Great having you. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Look, first I just wanted to acknowledge the depths of three things that I heard that landed really deeply. How you were talking about the visceral feeling, that my feelings of unworthiness are not proof of it. And that the thinking is really invisible. it's just, it feels like I want to repeat it and repeat it in my head. It's so huge. And then Rohini, you said something that I just noticed a desire to argue. And that was, so if you could talk about it more, that actually shift, you cannot force shift in consciousness. So I know that feeling, that arguing feeling or whatever, not believing or kind of, you know, because I would think that, hey, I make an intention or I pray or something, like I know that kind of would, but anyhow, if you could just dwell on it more, I would appreciate it. And I'm so happy to hear you guys.
Oh, that's great having you here, Olga. And I love those two things that really impacted you. So just let that kind of sink in, because it sounds like more is going to be revealed. And regarding what I said about how we personally aren't in control of our level of consciousness, for me, seeing that was such a huge relief. And I'm not saying that we're not going to have shifts in consciousness and growth in consciousness, but for that not to be up to my willpower, my grit, my effort, and to realize that and again, this is what's true for me. So it may not be what you believe or what you feel is true, but I'm just speaking to what I feel is true for me, to have an inkling that there's this deeper intelligence expressing itself through me and through every single one of us, and that there's an unfolding that's happening that's not on my timeline, that's also not on my effort. It was like, oh, I can just relax and let go then. And what really helped me was when I saw that there's just an infinite amount of levels of consciousness. There's no end to that. And so it didn't matter what shift in consciousness I had, I'd always be looking for the next one if I thought it was on me. I would be constantly, this one's not good enough, I got to get a better understanding. And it was so freeing to realize, like, there's no end to this. I may as well enjoy where I'm at, do the best I can here, and whatever happens, happens. And it was a really liberating experience when I saw that.
I see. I probably relating to it through fixing myself. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Olga.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. So, who else? It's so lovely having so many people on the call. Anyone else like to share something? We'd love to hear from you if you want to share. Any other but questions out there? I love to get those handled if there are anything that Del or I said, they're like, no, I don't agree with that. I love those questions. I also love it when you agree with me too, so. All right, so it seems like maybe that's it on the questions front. Del, is there anything else you would like to say before we finish off the evening?
I think I pretty much said it all. I'm just so incredibly grateful to have come across this understanding, and just that's why I love to share it so much, whether it's on my podcast or through my work. It set me free. It's the only thing I can say. You know, 30 years of therapy and workshops and everything took me from being suicidal to functioning here, but it was when I came across this understanding that the lid just blew off. You know, I could just I realized I'd been making up a story about myself all my life, and I can make up a new story. Everything's available.
I love that. We have another hand raised. So Coco, we'll go to you.
Hi, am I coming through?
Yes.
Audio.
Yes.
Hi, just before you check off.
Oh, hang on one second. So who's this speaking?
Linda.
Linda. Oh, Linda. Hi, Linda. So Coco, can we go to you next? Is that okay? Yeah, Linda. Oh, Linda, go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say thank you for inviting us all in. And, you know, I think right now, I'm just kind of really staying in knowing I don't know anything. And the thing that keeps coming up for me, and has been for a while, is that the only thing that takes us out is fear. When we live in no fear, we're feeling good and fine. And so our true nature is no fear. And our human form is fear. I mean, from the time we come into this world, like I laugh and I say, yeah, we start experiencing separation anxiety from the very moment. But we're all destined to know. It's our journey.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. I often feel it's love or fear, and the love is when I'm quiet and I'm just in that beautiful space of, like I said, where I feel at peace, I feel at one. And often when I'm in my head or I'm thinking, it is fear-based. It's whether it's planning, strategizing, but it's coming from fear. You know, I can get these incredible ideas that just come through me that are wonderful and they're perfect. And it's just what I needed to know in the moment. But when I'm up here, it's more often than not fear-based. And I just know that I don't want to live in fear. I know what that feeling feels like. I've been there, and I know I can just let go of this and just drop back in. And it's beautiful. It just feels, it's just love.
Mm-hmm. And the fear is not something we need to fear.
Yeah.
Because it's thought. And when we don't identify with our thinking, we can have the experience of fear without having the extra layers of fear on it. And then it just passes so much more easily. And then we get to kind of live in both worlds. We get to live in the human experience as well as the experience of who we are on a deeper level. And I think that's what's, you know, what was just being said, what Linda was just saying, that in terms of it, we're all destined to have that recognition of who we are beyond fear, the recognition of who we are in that deeper place inside of ourselves that is not identifying with our personal thinking. And we're just all on that journey together. And it's a beautiful journey. Thanks. Coco.
Hello there. You can hear me, yeah?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I'm in Seattle, and the coronavirus is having a really big impact on my experience. I have zero work for the rest of the month. And a lot of people I know are in the same position, and people are even like, I don't know if I should come by for coffee or not. I mean, it's, you know, social isolation is what's being encouraged. And what I wanted to share is that I read a very interesting article in Vox today about how social distancing creates social isolation. And how the more people feel isolated, how strong a effect that has on them physically. And it's typically true of people who are older. They're already feeling socially isolated. And then you have a situation like we're in right now. And there is even more with the social distancing, there comes a sense of even less interaction. So that is all to say, I'm not sure if you're planning on doing this online again. So when I was talking to my friend, I was like, well, I guess we're all just going to have to Zoom. Like, we're just going to have to start more groups to talk about things so that people can express themselves. Because I do think that when you air your fears, that it transforms them, just almost, you know, they dissipate like when once you say it out loud. So my question is, I just wanted to share that because I think it's an interesting aspect of what we're all going through and likely to be going through a lot more as we go forward here. And just, is this something that you're planning on doing again? I also sort of ended up here by happy coincidence, so I'm not sure what the plan is going forward.
Got it.
Thank you both, by the way.
Thank you, Coco. Well, I know about next month. So the format typically is that once a month we get together in LA and have an in-person meeting, but definitely for the next month, we're going to be having another virtual meeting, and I can even give you the date of that. And I'll send an email out and put it online too. Let me look it up. And this is going to be on April 16th at the same time. And the next person who's going to be speaking is going to be Elsie Spittle. So that's going to be a lovely evening. Elsie was going to do a live evening with us here in LA, but we're going to be doing it virtually now. And so I'll make sure that everybody knows about that. But I agree with you that we're going to get creative as human beings as to how to find that connection, how to find those ways to share our love and support and care with each other. And really, you know, this experience, as much as there's hardship for many associated with it, there's also going to be the blessings that we didn't realize that come of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel the same. I think just in many ways, you know, I love getting together in gatherings and having in-person things, but you know, having been a part of the 3PGC a couple of weeks ago, the global conference, it was amazing to me that we could still create the most beautiful feeling. And thank you, Claudette. I know you were on that too. And it just, and it really taught me something, that we can stay connected and we can get that feeling that we have when we're all together over Zoom. And I think it's also the planet is, you know, I think, you know, people are, I'm certainly questioning, do I need to keep flying everywhere and doing all these different things in person? I think there is going to be some good coming out of this. I think we are learning to be, as Rohini says, more resourceful, working from home. But again, I mean, keeping the connection, I think, is very, very important. And unfortunately, maybe for some older people, they don't have Zoom or they don't have communities they can be a part of. But maybe that's something we could invite them to, or reach out that way, because this feels beautiful when we get together.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And I think that when we each follow the inclinations and ideas that we get in terms of who we want to support, how we're going to support them, what that's going to look like, you know, that's a really beautiful expression of the human creative potential. And so I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that over the next days, weeks, and months as this unfolds. Mm-hmm. So thanks, Coco. Angus, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I know you want to finish up, but I didn't want that to happen before I responded to Linda, who using that term separation anxiety, that took on a whole new dimension to me just now, because I feel like all anxiety comes from separation, and it's the separation from our essential nature. That's the root of it all. And so there's so much depth in that. And I'd love to, you know, maybe this will be a conversation we'll have next time. But for me, that just really just spelled something out that was new and fresh. So thank you.
Thanks, Angus.
Yeah.
And we're not in a rush to finish. There just wasn't any more questions. That's why we're going to finish up. But I want to say a little bit about that, because that's really, you know, I love how you put that really the greatest fear is that we're separate. And the truth is that we're not. We're not separate from our essential nature. We never are, but sometimes we have the experience of being separate. But that's the, you know, Claudette was talking about the key misunderstanding. I think that must be the key misunderstanding in terms of the fear that comes up inside of us. And when we see more and more the truth of who we are, or we feel it, because it's not something that our intellect can get its head around, but when we touch into the truth of the love of who we are that is essential to each one of us, we feel that. And I was speaking, Dickon was speaking on a webinar this week, and he said something that is still kind of landing for me. He was saying how that experience of love is the experience of oneness, that they're not, that they are one and the same, and that when we are in that experience of loving, that is the experience of the connection of all things. And the more I reflect on that, the more that feels accurate and true to me. And from that place, there is no fear. Like you were saying, Linda, there is no fear when we are in that experience of love, because there is no separation there. So thanks for highlighting that, Angus.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, I don't see any more hands raised, so we can try finishing up again now and then see if someone else raises their hand. But I guess what I will say, just from logistics, since we definitely know the next one is going to be virtually, I send out an email to my email list letting people know about this. It's put on Facebook, but if you aren't on those lists or you're worried about missing it, I'm going to just type in the chat. Why can't I find the chat? Type in the chat my email address, and that way you can just email me, and then I can add you to the list if you're not already on there. So let me do that. Make sure I've typed it correctly. Okay. All right. So you can email me there if you want to make sure that you know about the next community night, and we'll make sure that you know about that. And yeah, Del, anything else you want to say?
Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. It was really lovely getting to meet some of you, and yeah, just encourage you to keep showing up. It took me a long time for it to sort of sink in too, but I just kept showing up and marinating in the feeling, and something happened. So.
And Del, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way? Your website, your email? Yeah,
my website is either deladeyjones.com, or my email is deladeyjones@gmail.com. So it's just all one word, no hyphens.
Okay, so I put in deladeyjones.com. Is that right? Can you see it? Okay, great. All right then. Well, I want to thank everybody too. So great. I mean, really, you know, it does feel like a blessing to be able to connect with all of you. So even though we had to cancel the in-person, I feel really grateful to have spent this time with you. It's been a really lovely evening, and look forward to perhaps having you on the next one in April. And if you have any questions that pop up after this that you didn't get answered here, you could reach out to either Del or myself. Either one of us would be happy to connect with you. So sending you all lots of love, and thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Del. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohini.
I'm going to unmute everybody so you can all say goodbye. How do I do that? There we go.
Oh, yeah, no.
All right.
Thanks, Del.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, before I
Thank you.
even hung up.
Great job, Rohini and Del.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
the mystery phone person. Bye, everyone.
John O'Connor.
I know, I recognized your voice in the second there. Bye.